Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my greatest pleasure to welcome you to Uganda Democratic Federation Zoom conference, whose theme is Regime Change in Uganda Now. Thank you very much for making time to come and attend this mini conference. We plan to be here for 2 hours. Some housekeeping information before we get started. The meeting is being recorded and streamed live on Facebook. All participants are muted. If you have a question, please type it in the chat and it will be answered during the Q&A session. It is very important that if we experience any major technical problems, we shall switch the meeting to Team Viewer. The link is provided in the chat. The corrupt military dictator, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, came to power 34 years ago. He ushered in a fundamental change of torture, tears, suffering, and a lot of blood. He has organized the elections with the fake results and declared wrong winners. Museveni has turned the NRM, his political party, and the government to a single apparatus to serve himself and his family. Currently, every institution in Uganda is corrupt, and the state, Uganda, as we know it, is failing. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an obligation, a responsibility to change the course of Uganda's future. The Constitution gives us that power. It will take a long time to reverse the decay, the damage that has been caused, and we have to act without further delay. Uganda Democratic Federation, UDF, has been working on regime change for more than 10 years. You can follow us at Twitter, at UD Federation. You can like us and follow us on Facebook, Uganda Democratic Federation, and on the World Wide Web, udfederation.org. We know that regime change in Uganda is inevitable. But what will happen after Museveni is gone? The country is fractured economically, socially, and politically. What will it take to transform Uganda from a subsistence society to a free and prosperous country again? To answer some of those questions and provide direction, UDF has picked a few of its members to talk to us today to highlight some of the policy directions that Uganda can take after Museveni is out of power. We have, first of all, Dr. Athanasius Majimbi Setimba, the chairman of UDF, who is going to make introductory remarks and make the case for regime change in Uganda. Will be followed by Mr. Mwanga Batuuka, the vice chairman of UDF, and he will be talking about and highlighting the economy. Then public health will be highlighted by Dr. Naka today, CN. The constitution and other political matters will be highlighted by Mr. Mubiru Musoke. And Dr. Sarah Mukebezi will give us some highlights on education. After that, we shall have the question and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions, please type them in the chat. It's okay to introduce yourselves in the chat, and you can also answer some of the simple questions other members might type in the chat. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Athanasius Majimbi Setimba, the chairman of UDF, for his introductory remarks and a case for regime change in Uganda. Dr. Majimbi.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. The Uganda Democratic Federation welcomes you to the Regime Change in Uganda Conference. We seek your voice, participation, and action in the undertaking to return hope and human dignity to our long-suffering people by bringing an end to the corrupt and rotten regime. These are hard times all over the world, especially for our people. We are feeding families, taking care of sick ones, getting personal protective equipment, and even washing hands present major challenges. The abandonment of our people by the corrupt regime in this time of the COVID-19 crisis has brought us to a place where we share their belief and their resolve to bring an end to this evil that has imposed itself on our people for so long. We have debts from a regime that's trying so hard to hang on to power at all costs. We have debts from COVID-19 with funds earmarked to fight it swindled. We have debts from non-COVID diseases as a result of the run-down healthcare system, which is in complete shambles. And we have deaths from the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have a perfect storm. The financial fallout of the COVID-19 is just beginning, and the mere thought of its severity is frightening. It's hurting, it's starving, and it's killing our people. When we talk regime change, we are talking survival. We are talking of seizing the moment to recognize grave responsibility and challenges before us and take immediate action now in order to avert the possibility of a total collapse event. The stakes have never been higher and the need for unity greater. Our forbearance, patience, and self-sacrifice, which have cynically been taken advantage of for so long, are now needed for the unit of purpose and action. Hussein Walugembe, the 29 years young fighter who set himself on fire at a police station in Masaka, challenged all of us. His sacrifice revealed the human spirit over which evil has no access, let alone power, and thereby laid bare the content of malice, heedlessness, recklessness, selfishness, shamelessness, cruelty, greed, ingratitude, vainglory, and hostility to God and to all nature. The end of his life was an affirmation for the choice of freedom and a strong desire we all share to free ourselves from captivity, from deprivation, from exploitation, from humiliation, from beatings on the street for no cause, from torture in safe houses, from a captured state terror, essentially laying our lives for humanity. There's no greater miracle in this life. The regime's claimed strength has always been the senseless use of violence against our people, their property, and the disruption of our kinship and common humanity, while peddling rabid self-interest and self-aggrandizement for national interest. Strengthened by 35 years of rampant corruption, of fraudulent elections, of senseless extrajudicial executions of proponents and opponents alike, we've slowly grown into the acceptance of love's narrative that collective responsibility and action are worthy living and dying for. The economy of liberation resides in the knowledge of the need for unity in order to overcome the differences and difficulties that inevitably arise when we make that choice between freedom and captivity. The seed for liberation has been planted by our pain, our forgiveness, and our patient suffering against the abuse of our rights, and watered by the blood of innocent victims of horrendous atrocities in the Luwelo Triangle, in northern Uganda, the massacres in Mukula in eastern Uganda, the massacres in Kasese in western Uganda. What a height of cruelty, a bottomless pit indeed. The desire for liberation has therefore transformed death, the regime's tool for expression, oppression and suppression, into an enabler of freedom, a deterrent for tyranny in the future, and a hope for a dignified, peaceful, and prosperous life at last. We march forward with assured victory, with the certainty of the end of this regime of death, destruction, and despair. There are some who have acquiesced and served this darkness, this terrible regime, and its network of patronage. They are then those whose expectation is that our liberation will rise from those institutions of darkness. They are all misguided. When we talk regime change, we are actually talking about annihilation of this regime, of this darkness, by the will of the people through an uprising. Enough. Enough already. Wouldn't it be glorious if the people of faith blessed and amplified our yearning for freedom? Would it be building up if the members of parliament, worthy of our respect and trust, resigned from this thieving, self-serving and mortified parliament immediately? Wouldn't it be inspiring and invigorating if the media and security agencies joined the chorus for freedom now and here? At UDF, over the past 10 years, we have been hard at work exploring and preparing what Uganda should do and look like in the years after the dictatorship. We have looked at everything. We've spent countless weekends researching and doing whatever is needed that would get us where we want to be. And we believe it when we say that UDF offers the best option for the phoenix-like rise from the ashes after Mr. Museveni. And if that comes across as a brief brag sheet, so be it. But the investment has been intensive. It has been deliberate and well-informed. We need partners from all walks of life and from all quarters of Uganda. We need your ideas. We thrive on the conflict of ideas. We need you. Today, you will hear from brilliant, competent, and dedicated experts of our vision, the one we've charted, and we keep working on tirelessly. But now, right here, we have an urgency that cannot wait, that cannot be postponed, that cannot and will not fail, and that awaits the collective agency of our faith, courage, and action. There may never be another opportunity for us to express the love we profess for God and country. Let's do this. What are we waiting for? Unity. Action. Now. Unity. Action. Now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Majimbi, for the introductory remarks. Next, we are going to Mr. Mwanga Batuka, the Vice Chairman of UDF, to give us some brief highlights on the economy. Mr. Mwanga Batuka.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be part of the conversation about our country with my fellow citizens. The conversation about the economy must start and end with a clear focus on the lives of the individuals in any given society, such as ours. Otherwise, discussing the economy can become an endeavor beyond the reach or the interest of an average citizen. So I'll start by asking, look at your circumstances, look at your families, look at your communities. What do you see? Do you see the hungry? Do you see the sick? Do you see the unemployed? Do you see kids that dropped out of school who have neither skill nor tools to fend for themselves now or in the foreseeable future? Do you see the environmental degradation? Do you know people, urban dwellers, who live in the slums in our towns and cities, where they are surrounded by uncollected garbage and the stench of leaking sewage? Do you see them? The pain, the fear, the despair that you see on their faces tells you all that you need to know about the state of the economy in Uganda. An economic discussion should not simply be about reciting GDP growth rates without showing, especially for those in power, the improvement in the quality of the life of the population. Uganda's economy is not the miracle that it is touted to be. But for those who are so inclined, I will then invite you to aggregate those faces that you've seen, then widen the aperture of your lens through which you've been looking at them. Abstract those faces into larger numbers and create a macro picture. Then you get to the social indicators that economists love to talk about. What you will see in Uganda are high levels of mortality rate, high levels of infant mortality rates, high levels of school dropouts, high levels of undernutrition, low human capital index, high levels of unemployment. But I shall not detain you by dwelling a lot on these social indicators. Rather, I'd like to focus on one indicator that I believe is extremely important, at least in pure economic terms. Uganda is one of the youngest countries in the world. 55% of Ugandans are under the age of 18. 700,000 of them are turning 18 every single year. 700,000. And there are only 75,000 jobs waiting for them. Think about it. 55% of the population being under 18, 700,000 turning 18, presumably now ready for the workforce, 75,000 jobs waiting for them. Therein lies the opportunity and also the risk. The risk is the high dependence ratio because you have a non-working young population, you have a youth bulge, which, if the choices we make on the political front, if we're not careful, this could become a social burden accompanied by the social ills that come when you have a huge youth bulge, which is uneducated, unskilled, and untold. Or, again, depending on the choice, this could be an opportunity to educate, to skill and tool a future labor force that can be a productive citizenry for both economic activity and the prosperity of the country. Such is the situation that Uganda faces as we look at the next regime that will come. So how do we define the economy as we see it now? The Ugandan economy is caught in a low income trap, which is characterized by low levels of physical capital. Physical capital is both productive and infrastructure, and it is maintained in this trap. It is stuck in this trap by low levels of skills, by low levels of savings, by low levels of investments, by low levels of aggregate demand. It is an economy that is like in a booting cycle, or like a vehicle that is stuck in a ditch with wheels spinning. And the government has not put forward any mechanism, any plan workable that can extricate this country from this income trap. So the goal for UDF should be to move the economy from this static low-income trap to a dynamic job-creating economy with rising incomes. This can be achieved by a systematic reallocation of the factors of production from low productivity, from traditional technology, from decreasing returns, from the preeminence of the primary sectors such as agriculture, which is still subsistent and which is generally extractive, to higher productivity, the introduction of modern technology, and the migration of the workforce from the primary sector, which is basically low-skilled and minimal income, to industrial, manufacturing, and services sectors. But before you reach that goal, there are some challenges that I would like to highlight, which you must recognize. There are three categories of challenges that I'm going to highlight. The first is going to be structural. The second is institutional. The third is political leadership. On the structural challenges, one, the dominance of the primary commodities kind of economy without industry, manufacturing, and sufficient service sectors to absorb the workforce. The absence of the core production infrastructure. Here I'm referring to energy or electricity, and I'm also talking about transportation, especially road networks, and communication, which should by now include fiber optics. The slow growth of agriculture and the absence of focus on value addition on that sector, which would increase employment, increase incomes, and produce products, excuse the redundancy, to enable these products to penetrate regional markets and international markets. And of course, the inadequate tooling and skilling of the labor force, which cannot take advantage of the jobs that are coming into the other services that require more skill, the lack of investment. Now, on the second category, institutional challenge, the biggest challenge under institutional challenges is corruption. A horrible business environment whereby there is uncertainty as to taxes. A business owner and an entrepreneur would never know what he or she owes government because it is arbitrary. Uncertainty of regulation. Anytime anyone can pull up some imaginary regulation in order to shake you down. No document, no license can be issued. No construction can take place without bribery. Then we have weak institutions, including those that were created to fight corruption. You have then an incompetent civil service. This is the interface between government policy and the citizenry in terms of service delivery. But it is stuck in tribalism, nepotism, and cronyism. Then you have a lack of independence for statutory organizations, statutory entities like Bank of Uganda, Uganda Revenue Authority. Without independence, without their impartiality, without professionalism, they cannot perform, certainly not the statutory responsibilities that they're supposed to perform. Then you come to the political challenges, the mother of all of them. I don't know what to say about this, but to quote Professor Adebaya Dedeji, the former chairman of the UN Economic Commission for Africa, who observed, and I quote, "Africa's disastrous economic problems stemmed from political turmoil, political mismanagement. The economic stagnation was and still is the manifestation of the political chaos." End of quote. I shall not detain you by walking you through the scene of political crimes or to make you relieve the pain, the loss, the pillage, and the deprivation. Suffice it to say that the next government will be shocked by the extent of the damage the NR regime has caused onto this country. UDF looks at a strategy to to push this economy from that low income trap by proposing that we should pursue a new economic development path that is aimed at job creation with a dynamically changing mix between state and market, in which government plays an important role in the following key areas: investment, 1; 2, human capital development; 3, institution setting; 4, market research; 5, promotion of business-friendly policies and reforms. I now shall mention the National Planning Authority that is already in place in Uganda. There is a plan that they produced in 2010, the National Development Plan. It is a good start, but it's mainly descriptive and it's not really a tool for execution. Even then, it was the task of political leadership to give that plan direction, to give it capacity, to give it sound management, and to give it execution. They did not. We believe that sound planning should start with an architecture of a vision to implement that plan. And it has to have 4 pillars. 1, enhancing agriculture, because that's where most of our people, 80% reside in rural areas, and many of them are already involved in agriculture, still the biggest earner when it comes to Uganda. Therefore, enhancing agriculture, 1 pillar, with value addition that is meant to move agriculture from simply an exercise where we till land and get crops and then yields and then we send them off, but to have value addition so that we can absorb more people with more skills as we get into the next secondary sector. Number 2, promoting private sector to make sure it is all common to everyone that government cannot create enough jobs for the population that is coming into the workforce. Therefore, the government or the state-private mix is ever so crucial. There has to be a deliberate option to give the young population and those who have entrepreneurial skill and drive to get into the private sector, helping them with science, technology, and innovation. 3rd, human resource development is going to be critical. And 4th, the infrastructure, which is an intermediate input. All those are critical. Then you have to have sound management of the economy. This will create 3 things. You create a system whereby you align the country needs and priorities. 2, you anchor the development partners onto the plan that you've clearly thought out, laid down, and created an architecture of what is important, what is the priority, what are the sectors that are going to push the economy from this jam. 3, you coordinate the ministries and the partners to bring about synergy, focus, and the ease of selection among competing demands. And you make sure that as government leads into the developmental stage, you sequence, you coordinate the investments that you're putting in. This is key because you get better absorption of investments, you get better returns on scale, you increase the externalities that are generated to lead into self-sustained growth. As different projects have linkage that can support each other, they're complementing each other, and then the investors are latching on as they begin to create niches, spaces where they can actually provide services to an expanding economy. Then you raise, because of that coordination, the sequencing, then you're going to have rise in marginal efficiency of these investments. Then you create sector linkages whereby the ministries, the different departments can begin to plan and link their plans to maximize those returns and effectiveness of the investment dollars. Ultimately, the resources will flow and government will begin to pull back from directing the economy as the private sector grows, as they begin to plan, to invest and hire people, incomes will begin to rise. The results would be structure changes in the patterns of production, technology upgrading, self-sustaining growth with wider linkages between sectors. You also have social, political, and institutional modernization. You would have a wider base for the national budget in terms of revenue collection. I end where I began, on a personal level. As incomes go up because of either employment and people getting wages, or because of self-employment and getting business income, this will happen and will bring about better quality in life. As skills go up, as savings rise, as investments rise, and as aggregate demand rises, the economy becomes more powerful. It becomes again a cycle, because the incomes will create more disposable income, out of which people can save, they can invest, or they can actually increase the demand of the services and products that are showing up in the marketplace, leading to a better quality of life as you have a competent administration. Ladies and gentlemen, for the privilege of lending me your ears, I'm much obliged. I come to the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mwanga Batuka, for the highlights on the economy, including problems and possible practical solutions. And next, we are moving on to Dr. Nakatude, who is going to give some highlights on public health. Dr. Nakatude, if you can unmute yourself, please.
I think I am.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also very excited to be able to contribute to the National Action Plan on Public Health in Uganda. What I'm going to provide is, again, as you mentioned, highlights of the work that has been ongoing and which continues to be, conducted as we move forward. This is the National Plan on Public Health. My presentation I'll talk about the existing challenges just briefly, because I think we are very much aware of the state of health, public health in Uganda. And then I'll emphasize areas of commitment that UDF is making a commitment to after regime change towards health and healthcare. So I'll also be talking about two specific strategies that UDF hopes to improve access, health services across the country. So when we say we, I mean UDF believes that health is a very important aspect of the country and the economy. It contributes to economic development, and also it grow to people acquire skills, grow, and satisfy personal aspiration when they are healthy. So for health is an important component of our plan, of the action plan. And as the chairman mentioned at the beginning, the COVID-19 has demonstrated to the world and to UDF that health, public health, particularly health promotion, disease prevention as key components of any plan that any country would want to take in the future from now on. So health becomes a very important part of our rebuilding of decay that we have witnessed in the country. Now, what I'm going to go straight to the existing challenges, briefly, because I am assuming that these are very well known, but for those who are not very familiar with the Ugandan state of affair, and we understand we have the poor funding of the health sector, and which results in high mortality rates and many diseases. We have lack of emergency care, lack of hospitals. The hospital we have was built by the colonialists, the Europeans when they were still there. The corruption and theft has been mentioned and will be mentioned throughout because it runs through the political system, social and economic systems in our country. So because this one is key in medication, when you have medication equipment, an ambulance stolen, when you have sick people who can't pay bribe, so then they don't get. So those are the key features of what makes Uganda healthcare just, we can't tolerate that any more than we have been doing so. Then we have the shortage of qualified personnel, poorly trained and fake doctors. You have many fake doctors in Uganda, lack of safety control for imports and the dispensation of drugs, lack of ambulances and ambulance services. Then we've been talking about direct investment as one of the key commitments, and I'm rushing in the interest of time in public health. And then UDF proposes to enforce, public health laws so that their investment can be seen as promoting what the goals are. And then the community paramedic program that we propose to implement. And we are working on the universal health insurance as a way of improving health status and improving the health and quality of life that my previous speaker spoke about, and including the environment. In environment, we talk about air quality. I know it was mentioned briefly in the previous presentation. Environment includes air quality, sanitation in homes and schools, and clean water wells, all that, and the chemical dumping of from breweries that dump that is not unmitigated because of bribes and political neglect. So when we talk about enforcing public health laws that will assist to prevent the disease outbreaks, we want to prevent workplace and home injuries, the overcrowding in schools and other places, and food security. Food security is an important component of public health because most of the food we get is not, fit for human consumption. So that's an area that's of very importance to as we move towards implementing the new action plan. The other very critical area in the public health is the cleanup. This sounds like basic activity, but it's important. We can't overemphasize the importance of cleaning up public spaces and finding viable solutions for the use of plastics. Undertake public awareness campaigns, that's highlighting the benefits of immunization, and recruit and train large numbers of public health workers, because without them, we won't be able to achieve the goals that we want to achieve at the end of the day. Now, I mentioned briefly at the beginning about the UDF's commitment to community paramedic programs. At this stage, that is one of the innovation that we think will make significant difference, as we have these paramedic programs running around within countries to take blood pressure, to deal with chronic disease management, especially diabetes, for example. So that we have these are big plans. Health insurance, for example, is being tried in our neighboring countries. So we were looking into how do we make that possible within the population as we plan make bigger plans. Now, so how do we achieve all this? And given the previous presentation talking about the state of the economy and the devastation and decay of all institutions, both public and private, so there will need to be extensive investment to build and rehabilitate existing infrastructure. And priority areas, as I mentioned, would be health promotion, and disease prevention, so that, and this is one aspect of health. There's another curative aspect that we think will be ongoing, but for us, the public health component, and given the COVID and other infectious diseases like Ebola have led us to think of public health as key element as we begin to unravel the decay, the political decay and neglect of these institutions and systems, and the river, clean up those wetlands. So I know I've rushed through. There's a lot to cover because this is a big sector, and we haven't even mentioned pharmacy, pharmacology. We haven't even talked about animal industry and everything, but we are working on all this. This is a highlight. In the next presentation, I hope there will be another one soon. I'll be elaborating on some key areas that we think, and I'm referring to EDF, we think are significant to highlight for those who want to be following on, to know closely what we are up to. So I would leave that to, if there are questions, I'll be pleased to answer any question at this time. But for now, in the interest of time, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity that you've given me today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nakatude, for outlining UDF's plan for public health with emphasis on prevention. Thank you so much. Next, we are moving on to Mr. Mubiru Musoke to talk about the Constitution and related matters. Mr. Mubiru Musoke, please, if you could unmute yourself and start your presentation. Thank you. Mr. Mubiru Musoke, are you there? You are muted. If you could unmute yourself. If you are not ready, we can move on to the next speaker, Dr. Sarah Mukebezi. She can go first on education, which is another very, very important sector. And we know what is going on right now in Uganda, lots of problems. So let's have Dr. Mukebezi give us her presentation on education while we wait for Mr. Mubiru Musoke.
I actually have unmuted now.
Okay, so please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I was suspicious maybe the enemy was still trying to interfere with my presentation. But thank you very much. My topic is the 1995 Constitution. First of all, let me point out that the 1995 Constitution was praised when it was enacted. The only reason why it was praised was that ordinary people were allowed to participate in its making. That is, we are told that 25,000 memoranda were submitted by the people, and many of these, more than half of these, were from the ordinary people at the RC1, RC2, and so on and so on. That idea that a lot of people contributed to the making of the 1995 Constitution distorts the very image and picture of the content of the 1995 Constitution. The participation of the people does not necessarily translate into quality of the document that was produced. And I'll be brief in pointing out the contradictions and paradoxes that pervaded and still pervade the 1995 Constitution. First of all, Article 20 stipulated clearly that human rights are inherent, they are not provided by the state. And Article 39 clearly outlined these rights of the people: the right to assemble, the right to elect the government, the right to associate, freedom of speech. But at the same time, we had Article 269 in the Constitution, which stipulated that on the commencement of this Constitution, and until Parliament makes laws regulating the activities of political organizations in accordance with Article 73 of this Constitution, political activities may continue except opening and operating branch offices of political parties, holding delegates conferences of political parties, holding public rallies of political parties, or even sponsoring or offering a platform to or in any way campaigning for or against a candidate for any public elections. And so you can see that Article 269 was contradicting what Article 20 stipulated and what the rights which we have provided for the people to enjoy in Article 39. That's why the 1995 Constitution was not only a paradox, it was a contradiction. Can we continue to support such a constitution? Yes, it stipulates certain basic fundamental principles. For example, Article 1 says that all power belongs to the people, who shall exercise their sovereignty in accordance with this constitution. The principle of sovereignty of the people is a historical constitutional principle. It wasn't born in Uganda by the 1995 constitution. The principle of the sovereignty of the people was at first articulated by Chief Justice John Marshall of the United States in a case called the Marbury versus Madison. In that case, what the Chief Justice was saying was that if a constitution is written and when powers, executive powers and legislative powers are separate, then the people are sovereign because the courts can nullify any legislation that is inconsistent with the constitution. That's where this principle arose from. We just borrowed it, and in fact, it has been borrowed universally throughout the globe. So it's not, we cannot give the makers of the 95 Constitution credit for enacting Article 1, providing for sovereignty of the people, because this had a historical evolution.
Mr. Mubiru Musoke, you keep on disappearing. Can you make sure that everything is tight? You know, you are making a very good presentation, but you keep on breaking up and this, going far and closer. Thank you.
Well, I'm closer to my microphone, and I was just trying to make a point about the sovereignty of the people provided for in the 1995 Constitution. The other principle, of course, is the supremacy of the Constitution. The supremacy of the Constitution also is an old principle, which was embedded in the American Constitution. We cannot thank the people who made 1995 Constitution for enacting these principles, sovereignty of the people and supremacy of the Constitution, to put them in the 1995 Constitution. In any case, and this is the more important point I want to make, constitutions do not exist in a political vacuum. The leaders play a big role in making the people united, in protecting the interests of the people, in championing their causes. In Uganda, we have the opposite. We have a leader who has amended the Constitution twice. First removing term limits and then removing age limits so that he can continue indefinitely to be the president. Such a president cannot be a president of the people, as Abraham Lincoln would put it, by the people for the people, because he is there for his personal interests. So constitutions do not exist in a political vacuum. Whatever the content in the Constitution, it has to be implemented and put in force and enjoyed by the people. Then I have another point here to make. Article 3. Article 3 provides that it is prohibited for any person or group of persons to take or retain control of government of Uganda, except in accordance with the provisions of this constitution. That provision is inconsistent with the first provision of sovereignty of the people. If the people are sovereign, they can do anything they want. They have the power, they have the authority to do so. And if the Constitution is supreme, it is supreme. Why? because it is protecting the people. If it ceases to protect the people, then the people can rise up and overthrow that constitution. In fact, Article 3, subsection 3 says, and let me quote it for clarity and for people to understand what I'm talking about. It says that this constitution shall not lose its force and effect, even where its observance is interrupted by a government established by the force of arms. And in any case, as soon as the people recover their liberty, its observance shall be re-established, and all persons who have taken part in any rebellion or other activity which resulted in the interruption of or the observance of the shall be tried in accordance with this constitution and other laws. Now, this provision is inconsistent with Article 1, which says the people are sovereign. Why are the people sovereign? They are sovereign because they can do anything. The ultimate power of government rests with the people. If the people are tired of the government, they can take it out, they can overthrow it because they are sovereign. In any case, what does sovereignty mean? Sovereignty means that the people have rights, rights to assemble, rights of speech, the rights to organize themselves, and the rights even to oppose the government. Now, if these rights exist, and if they are protected under international law, then I can't see how Article 3, subsection 3 can make sense. In any case, Article 3, subsection 3 of was borrowed wholesale from Article 136 of the Mexican Constitution. We should not be ruled by provisions from the Mexican Constitution, and especially if the people are sovereign, the people can nullify a constitution. They can remove any government. They are free to do all these things because Article 20 says that the rights, human rights, are not granted by the government, by the Constitution. They are inherent. In other words, they are born with those rights. So clearly, when you look at the 1995 Constitution, what you see are contradictions. In any case, and this is the most important point, the 1995 Constitution is a unitary constitution. I don't want a unitary constitution. I want a federal constitution. I want federalism. Then who can tell me that I cannot overthrow this constitution? That even after I've overthrown it, it will somehow, like a ghost, rise from the grave and still rule me. I can't accept that. If the people are sovereign, then people are entitled to govern themselves. And if the people, the Constitution itself is the supreme law, then those rights are protected. But as I pointed out, Mr. Chairman, concluding now, constitutions do not exist in a political vacuum. They exist in a political reality. When they cease to protect the rights of the people, or when a regime refuses to protect the rights of the people, then the people have a right to rise up against that regime and overthrow it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mubiru Musoke, for your presentation on the 1995 Constitution. We had some problems with the audio, but I think we shall just go ahead. Thank you so much. The 1995 Constitution has got lots of problems, and I think we might, have a separate discussion about it, because I've had a lot of good points that all Ugandans should know going forward. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Next, we are going to hear from Dr. Mukebezi, and she's going to give us highlights on education. Dr. Mukebezi, unmute, please.
Thank you very much, our host. A job well done. My fellow listeners, my fellow Ugandans, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. Bear with me if I ramble, because I tend to, but I'm talking about a topic or a subject of great passion to me, and to which I have dedicated much of my professional life, and that is education, quality education for all. And I'm going to narrow it down and really focus more on basic quality education, and that takes in the preschooling, primary schooling, secondary schooling. And I believe and I hope that many of us here today and moving forward care about the delivery of this type of quality education for Ugandan children. It is the foundation upon which tertiary or university or post-secondary education and lifelong learning is based. So we owe it to our new Uganda post-7 to really embrace quality basic education. And the type of education UDF and my colleagues who have spoken before me aspire to, along with you who are listening in today, and also our caring allies all over Uganda. This type of education has to focus on education for sustainable development and nation building. It has to be inclusive and equitable. And by that I mean it has to reach and serve all the children of Uganda from their diverse background, from every corner of the country and geographical location, urban, semi-urban, or rural setting. They all have to be reached, engaged, and supported in their learning. I think we all know that we face a steep climb to get to our aspired goal of this type of education. After 34 years of reckless leadership and mismanagement of the country's affairs, Ugandan children face multiple barriers to full participation. And many of these barriers have been exacerbated by the onset of COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll be talking about it at the end, somewhere in my presentation. I wish this was a conversation and not a presentation, because I do like the exchange of ideas. I like the input of others, but let us be hopeful, because that moment will come. But let us see, why are we even talking about quality basic education? And I'd like to share some of the statistic findings that actually are quite troubling. 87% of children in sub-Saharan Africa, they are really learning poorly, and they are lacking functional skills. And we'll be talking about those functional skills. 250 million primary and secondary children are out of school in Africa due to COVID-19. And that come on top of the barriers they were facing before the virus took root. And many people say, oh, well, now we are in the new era of digital remote learning. Well, here's another shocking statistic. When it comes to digital remote learning, less than 25% of low-income countries provide remote learning opportunities, compared to 90% rate of high-income countries, you can only guess where Uganda falls in that statistics. And also remember that remote learning platforms require internet and hardware that are inaccessible to the majority of our people, especially the rural and the poor household. But that is the COVID, and later on we'll talk about it. I like to talk about what we all know, but why? Let us revisit that together. The educational system in Uganda is failing children based on these factors, which we all know too well, whether we are born 10 years ago or 60 years ago, like I was. These are really persistent and troubling barriers that continue to face our children. Unaffordable costs. Bana Basome or UPE aside, we still have a very, very challenging for people to afford education because of so much of the cost that goes into education beyond just the school fees. We talk about uniforms, we talk about textbook, we talk about bags of cement, whatever that is supposed to address. That becomes a barrier to equitable and inclusive participation in education. Shortage of classrooms. That is before COVID-19. So we still had shortages of classmates. And when we had classrooms, they were all torn apart, dilapidated, largely in the rural, marginalized urban areas. And it was always overcrowded. And the class sizes were so far bigger. Many of us have seen images of children sitting on a bench meant for two, and there are 6 kids balancing. Yeah, they are physically fit because of this tremendous balancing, but that's not a suitable learning environment. Then there are also the substandard learning environment within the classroom, and that really includes curriculum material, rote learning, language of instruction when kids don't even understand what they're learning. How can it be that Uganda and South Korea were both at the same level in the 1950s when we were entering independence? We're at the same level with South Korea. South Korea decided to educate their kids in the language they understand. Well, guess what? South Korea is now importing cars, and Uganda is, well, I'll leave it for you to finish that sentence for me. We undervalue the teaching professional. You know, from recruiting and training them, we say, well, I didn't get into university, poor you, why don't you go into teaching? We still undervalue this most vital tool, the vehicle, the fundamental vein of what my other previous colleagues talk about, the public health, the social protection, the economical stimulus that we know, and the constitutional affair. Who's going to be doing all that if you don't have the fundamental basic education that really is a platform from which we all spring to move forward? And then, of course, when we get good teachers, we underpay them. So all of these things are very, very, very challenging to the education system today. And I won't go so much into more than that, but I like to say, how do we then move forward, especially the vision of the UDF? There is so much we can do, but no one can do it alone. We need a collective. We need everybody to step forward without leaving anyone behind. It is a multi-stakeholder analysis or provision of those solutions. Some of them will require a little bit of experimentation, and we should be comfortable with experimenting and failing, but we are with a crisis and we need to throw everything on the wall, against the wall, and see what sticks. For example, when you look at the stopgap measures that have been taken when COVID hit, and it hasn't even been 6 months. Yeah, children continue to learn during this pandemic, and they are really here where we are in many Western countries. Kids continue to learn online, but these are not suitable for Uganda. And for some instance, they amplify the inequalities that already exist. Inequalities based on gender, inequalities based on rural versus urban center, socioeconomic status, tribal divisions, and even in the physical ability, whether you are physically able to learn or whether you're emotionally able to learn. So the suggestions, well, these suggestions I'm about to offer for our consideration and for future discussion are really based on some assumptions that in the absence of face-to-face teacher interactions and regular classroom activities, let the teachers maybe prepare the lessons, because we do have those who have dedicated their lives and you know them. They are your neighbors, they are your relatives who have said, against all odds, continue to provide it to the best of their ability, education to the children. But in the absence of that face-to-face interaction in the COVID-19 era, is there an opportunity which we can explore that the teachers continue to teach, to prepare so that it is in a way the lessons are picked up by the students? I don't know, that could work. Do we work with base our education delivery on the children's age, so that the children who may really be allotted different subjects based on their learning needs? Of course, this is assuming that the assumption is that there are so many reading materials and the textbooks are so available, not all the children, and that's where the equitable and the inclusive aspect of quality education comes in Uganda. Not everybody has access. You know, you can enroll and you can sit in the classroom, dilapidated as it may be, but you may not have those textbooks. So for us to assume that the kids can come and pick up the textbook and go, that's assuming there is that ability, and we'll be talking about how do we make that happen. Thirdly, how do we teach? Maybe do we give priority in this era to maybe more academic courses and look at math and language arts and not so everything? Do we dissect it and say what is going to be reading and numeracy? Is that going to be the priority? That is something we can also look at. Do we recruit maybe other teachers who teach social studies and other physical education, and they become assistant to these critical and vital academic lessons? That could be something we can consider. Do we recruit volunteers, in the community volunteers, to assist the children who are really, especially who are teenagers, let us say? They have tested a little bit of education and all of a sudden they're idle. That is a social threat. We are already seeing that unless an intervention is declared very quickly, we may really be in a social upheaval, and when kids have nothing to do. I also think UDF, I have been encouraging this in our discussions, they have to declare education workforce as an essential frontline workforce. It has to be on top of the military, if you ask me. It has to be prioritized against all of it, because there is a cross-cutting public health, social protection, economic cost. Education is the tool, is the engine that drives all that. That which can be provided. The school itself, in terms of the mortar and brick, provides a lot for the public health. Remember the days when we used to go for health immunizations in the schools? You reached a lot of numbers. It was a multiplier effect. So there is also that approach we could take. Now, I like to really talk about whose responsibility is it anyway? And this is when I become very, very passionate about this. This is a multi-stakeholder critical analysis support that we need. Yes, the government, any government, including the Aspire to UDF government that we know will be brilliant, but it is going to need other little soldiers to support it along the way. In terms of, the government has a role, definitely. Effective sharing of information, investing into the educational system, and the purchase of learning materials that are required. This also includes sanitation and well-being of the learner child, including the girl child. By the way, sanitation goes a long way. It's not just the water and flushing toilets, but it's also the adolescent girl who should not be leaving school because they have their menstrual period. So we have to provide, that's an essential service, the same way we give immunization for the prevention of measles. We do, and I think this was spoken about in one of the presenters, mobilizing of the private sector resources and other innovative solutions to make sure that they are also stakeholders and they are also partners in this struggle. Community, neighbors, and the civil society, or what we call NGOs, they have a role to play in filling the gap for education. They can really feed the kids, because malnutrition is a big component. A hungry child cannot learn. They could monitor and evaluate the processes and the behavior of the teachers and the comings and going and the school management within their communities. Also, the community support can drive parents to be able to be key players, and not only sitting back and say the kids are in school and I'm free, no, but to say what is it that I can do to support. However, the impact of education today in COVID has a long-term implication, and this is important. This immediate response we see today has a very long-term recovery implications. And for a continent with enormous human capital, and Uganda specifically, its biggest asset is its people. Yet we do have, in terms of skills and productivity, we do have that deficit of learning. And learning cannot wait for us to complete returning to normalcy. And I don't even think we're going to ever return to the good old days. COVID may be here to stay. So this could be our new normal. So that being the case, we need to have to create an educational system, a knowledge transfer system which is foundational for the 21st century and really very dynamic for the labor market of tomorrow. That's where I see these multi-stakeholders can allow us, those who don't have credentials to teach in the classroom, they are soft skills for humanity, or Ubuntu. We all say Ubuntu, Muntu Mulamu. We just have to make sure that everybody knows they have a role to teach our children communication skills. Those are all the soft skills needed in today's workforce. Hygiene, proper hand washing, grooming, critical thinking, active listening, so that people, when they listen for facts, for feelings, and for purpose. Caring for others, that used to be central to who we are as Africans, as Ugandans. We care for one another. May I remind you how we bury our dead? That is caring. That is a collectiveness. We need to get back to our fundamental roots. Volunteerism, or giving back to the community. Then, my fellow Ugandans, we can start to talk about technical skills, things like financial literacy, public health, economical social protection, economical stimulus, and constitutional affairs, until such a time that every child can read and write and think critically. We are whistling in the wind. I look forward to the next conversation when we meet face to face. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mukebezi. That is really very challenging. I like the idea of long life learning and everything else about sustainable learning. Thank you so much for the highlights. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard it from UDF members that are very, very passionate about Uganda. If you sat down with any of them, you will be blown away by the commitment, by the eloquence, and the excellence of what they do. We started with the chairman of UDF with his call to action, and its time is now. Then we went to problems related with the economy, the public health, and the education. In the short time they had, they offered solutions, possible practical solutions, which is excellent. And we also heard from Mr. Mubiru Musoke about the illegitimate 1995 constitution that has got many contradictions, and it shouldn't even be there. You also heard about the infectious disease, the most serious infectious disease in the century, COVID-19. We have a number of questions in the chat. We are not going to answer all of them today, but a few of them I'm going to try and combine some ideas here, or I can just read them as they are. I think the first question is directed to the chairman of UDF, and it's Yoweri Kaguta Museveni has been in power for 34 years. How would you rate his honesty and credibility during that period?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to humbly state that any reference to Mr. Museveni as president of Uganda is not correct. Here we have an individual who has never succeeded in winning a single election. He has repeatedly conducted power grabs through a charade of fraudulent elections. He's therefore correct when he states that he's not anyone's employee, because he's not. He is consistent when he states that he works for himself, his family, and grandchildren, if criminality can be called work. He is consistent when he states that he killed his animal and can therefore do whatever he wants with it. Indeed, for 35 years he has done so. His success has been in convincing the Uganda political elite to participate in their humiliation and captivity, legitimizing a captured state. It's therefore correct to assert that there is no political opposition in Uganda. It's not just arrogance and the impunity that underlie Mr. Museveni's statements. There's more to it than probably meets the eye. The total malice project, a darkness that subdues, corrupts, blinds, and totally destroys one's spirit. Honesty, credibility, he has none. Suffice to mention his first inaugural speech when he stated that Africa's problem was dictators who stayed so long. How does that relate to later assessments that revolutionaries do not surrender power and that Africans are weak? Then you have his much talked about 10-point program. What a joke. It was supposed to end sectarianism, corruption, and lead to prosperity and security, among others. Well, he has attributed those inconsistencies to Ugandans' naivety in believing that his state capture would result in the outcomes mentioned in the 10-point program. All that pass for institutions, parliament, judiciary, security agencies are tools to effect Mr. Museveni's project. He has stated that parliamentarians can sleep all they want if, when the time comes and they are called upon to pass any legislation, that they will do so, and they have obliged. He calls the Uganda People's Defense Forces his army, and the police his police. Uganda oil industry falls under his oil. You have a total malice project, corrupt and evil to the core, fraught with rabid self-interest and self-aggrandizement that has fostered its form of apartheid, separate growth and prosperity for his family and sycophants. The question we have today is simple. There is no honesty, there is no credibility in the man. But can the people of Uganda bring this madness to the end? Can they end it? Unity, action, now. Thank you very much.
We have another question here from, this one is, I don't know the person, but corruption is found in every institution in Uganda. What would it take for Ugandans under the post-Museveni administration to effectively deal with the corruption? Mr. Mobiru, it's okay if you could answer that. You need to unmute, please.
Yes, I have unmuted.
Did you hear the question?
Can you repeat it, please?
Corruption is found in every institution in Uganda. What would it take for Ugandans under the post-Museveni administration to effectively deal with the corruption?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. First of all, we have to understand what the sources of corruption are. They are, most of the corruption comes from the so-called historical principle of NRM. If you contributed, if you fought in the war, in the Bush War, you were going to be rewarded with so many assets of land or whatever, or even money. So the second cause of the corruption in Uganda is the merging of the state with the political party called NRM. As long as NRM is part and the same thing as the state of Uganda, you are going to have corruption. In fact, during the observers of the elections 2006, 2011, 2016 of the Commonwealth, British Commonwealth and the European Union pointed this out, that there was, during those elections, no level playing ground, and also the corruption of the incumbency because of this merge of the NRM with the state. Of course, the NRM came with the so-called individual merit principle, which was really designed to make people not affiliate with the political parties. I've already pointed out what the Article 269 did. It prohibited any activities by political parties except within NRM. And that also has contributed to corruption. So the so-called individual merit principle. There was no individual merit under NRM except to corrupt the political process. For example, the case of Amos Sempala Kigozi versus Ignatius Komu from Bulemes in 2005. Komu, because the Constitution requires academic qualifications, you must have certain academic qualifications. Komu committed forgery and created certificates he never earned from the academic institutions. And this is going on. They are still doing this. So when you look at those principles which have tainted the entire regime, the system of NRM government, you look at the major corruption scandals. These included the so-called junk helicopter scandal, in which Salim Saleh, the brother of Museveni, was paid $800,000 so that the company could sell the junk helicopters to Uganda. There were some other privatization scandals of UCB, for example, police scandals investigated by Justice 17-day showed that the police created false pay roles and created dummy employees, and these people were earning money from the taxpayers because of the system they were operating. The Chogum procurement, I think you remember that one. That led to the Vice President Bukenya staying in jail in Rosetta for a few days, and he was charged with under Section 11 of the Anti-Corruption Act for abuse of office. So you see, abuse of office is going on; it's everywhere. And there is the famous mismanagement of the global fund, in which Jim Wales was the Minister of Health, Dr. Muhewa and Alex Kamugisha and Michael Mukula. These people trained the global fund. They treated this as if it was their own fund. And in fact, they used the global fund to pay Rich medical bills in Nairobi.
Mr. Mbiru Musoke, your microphone, there is some loose connection. Try to make sure that everything is working right. You jump off and back on, and you go far and you come back in. The main question was, what would it take for Ugandans and the post-Museveni administration to effectively deal with the corruption? Now, if you could summarize, please, your answer.
Yeah, what it will take is a change of the system, a change of the regime. As I said, most of the corruption arises from the principles under which NRM operated. So it will take change of the regime to clean up the system, to eradicate the sources of corruption, which I mentioned, which are embedded within the NRM system. And now that there is even what they call the illicit international financial flows, these are like a piggy bank for the NRM business people. The international illicit international flows, they are used when somebody is importing goods or exporting goods. They give you the wrong prices, and the balance is banked in their own accounts. So what will it be? It will. What is necessary is a regime that is not corrupt, but that's not sufficient. What is even more important is to make sure that there is rule of law, and that for example, everybody is accountable. Most of the corruption in Uganda today arises from misgovernance, lack of governance, which includes the absence of the rule of law. So, but you can't achieve, you can't reform the system unless you clean it up. In other words, you remove NRM regime and replace it with a different one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have a question on the economy for the Vice Chairman of UDF. Uganda is once again among the highly indebted countries, the poorest of the poor. Now, there are calls from the World Health Organization and other international institutions in light of COVID-19, devastation of economies, for debt forgiveness. Why is it that Uganda, despite all the development partner support, keeps on asking for debt relief?
Thank you, the host. The question, the answer is actually simple. It is, I can break it in several categories. The number one, as I highlighted in my presentation, is corruption. We've all heard stories about scandals and they keep coming. Corruption has reached epidemic proportions in Uganda. So basically, money is being stolen by the president and his family members and those that the sycophants that surround him. So that's the number one issue. The second issue, if one had to be generous and say, hey, how about some of the money that goes into projects? One of the issues that I kind of touched on tangentially in my presentation is where I spoke about coordination, sequencing, and linkage, is that you increase the returns on those on the funds that are received in the country by making sure that you have effective planning. If you have coordination and you have linkages so that whatever you plan to put on the ground has something that has outgrowth that can benefit the larger economic activities of a surrounding area or the country. So without that kind of planning, you find out that we are not getting sufficient returns, and we don't have what I call marginal efficiency when it comes to those investments. And then the last point is we are lacking domestic revenue base. The biggest percentage of our budget is from outside, and unfortunately, if you look at the recent National Budget Framework paper, which covers the financial year 2020 and 2021 to 2024, 2025, you will see shockingly reductions in key areas where most of our citizens are working. For instance, when you look at agriculture, the reduction, the difference between the budget of 2019-2020 to the one of 2020-2021, there is a reduction of over 103 billion shillings. That is a key source of economic activity in Uganda. If you cite another area where you would have activities that would give you revenues, for instance, tourism, there was a reduction of 11 billion shillings. If you want to look at, for instance, trade and industry, it's the same thing. So the point I'm making in the in the third element that I'm raising and developing is that if government does not focus on those activities that would increase income, increase the revenue base, then it does not have sufficient revenues coming into the coffers. When it does, and then it has on the other side, it has expenditure, it results to borrowing. So in summary, those are the things. One, corruption. Second, ineffective planning, which does not allow good absorption of those dollars. And third, that is going to be the lack of support for the most productive sectors of the economy, where government would have been able to help citizens to increase income bases for both the businesses and the individuals, and be able to collect more taxes to help reduce the burden or the necessity to keep borrowing money.
Thank you very much. We have a question here on COVID-19. It's a healthy question. It could be answered by Dr. Naka today, or I'm going to send it to the chairman of UDF, since he's a medical doctor. COVID-19 finds Uganda's health system in dire condition. If Africa were to be the next epicenter of this pandemic, as the World Health Organization predicts, what would be the appropriate response of the Uganda government and the people of Uganda? Mr. Chairman, this is, if you could provide, you could answer that question, please.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, before we go into details, I would like to remind Ugandans that this is a very serious situation of COVID-19. And of course, the social media has all sorts of messages relating to it, and some of them are fake and false. But what I would like them to take home today is that this is a serious condition. It's affecting the whole world, and it's going to affect Africa very harshly, and now that it has gone into the transmission phase. What we are going to see is a situation uncontrollable. Definitely there has been an effort in terms of the hard lockdowns, and after some time we've moved now to the soft or smart lockdowns. But the utility of these lockdowns is essentially to prevent the healthcare systems from collapsing. What you have in most sub-Saharan African countries, run down healthcare systems because of neglect and lack of investment in the past. And that finds us in a very difficult situation. I'll give you an example of Uganda, where we have 55 intensive care beds, and only 20% of them are functional. And then we have 170 intensive care nurses, and just a fraction of them are really trained intensive care nurses. To put it bluntly, Uganda has no intensive care unit capacity. And so without that capacity in terms of professional help, and given the fact that the funds that were earmarked to fight COVID have been swindled in Parliament, as you're all aware, and therefore you cannot have intensive care unit service, you cannot have personal protective equipment, you cannot have ventilators. That creates a very dire situation. And so COVID, especially the fallout, the financial fallout of the COVID-19 is just beginning. And that puts us in a very difficult situation. The key point really is for the people to continue to be vigilant, to wear masks, to social distance themselves, to wash hands, sanitizers if they are available, and above all, to hunker down at home if they don't need, if there's no need to go anywhere, to stay home. This is going to take a while. Until that time, when better medications are available, when vaccines are effective, and there are several vaccines going through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and before the end of the year, probably we will know if there is one that can protect populations from COVID-19. In the meantime, the right thing to do is to be careful I say it again, wear masks, social distance, get hunkered down at home. But these are difficult things to do in the environment we have in Uganda. They present major challenges, and we do understand that. But listen to the experts in Uganda and within the Ministry of Health, those professions, they know what they're talking about. But there's no leadership. We are in a situation of a corrupt regime that has spent millions treating people outside in government and sycophants of the government, hundreds of millions of dollars over a long time. That amount of funds would have made a major difference, but that's water under the bridge. Right now, right here, the message is to overthrow this regime through a people's uprising. We can do it with unity, with action now. Let's stop this madness and pave the way forward for healthier Uganda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to ask the co-host to read the questions that she has picked from the chat. Mr. Exize, if you could do, read some of the questions, and probably you know who, if they are dealing with health, government or economy, you can direct them to the panel, the panelists, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, the host. And the next question goes, the question is, the issue of orders from above continues to violate the law against torture and other citizens' rights. What has UDF done or plans to do about this situation? And I think this goes to Mr. Mubiru-Soke.
Mr. Mubiru-Soke, there is a question. Did you hear that? Please, you need to unmute and briefly answer that question because we are running out of time. I think we can put in a few more questions and
yeah, I think I've unmuted.
Please, yeah.
Am I breaking it, breaking up again?
You are much better now.
Maybe I fixed the problem. Yes, thank you very much for that question. Orders from above. There are two laws in Uganda, in fact, that prohibit anybody, law enforcement, any rank, to say that certain orders which are illegal are from above, and therefore you have to implement them. The first is the Rome Statute, which is a part of the law of Uganda. Under the Rome Statute, anybody who executes an order that is illegal is responsible and liable for it. The commander also, by the way, is also responsible and liable for it. So the one who executes the order and the commander, they are both liable. So there is no excuse. One can say, oh, I did this because I was given an order from above. The same, the other law that deals with this issue is the Convention Against Torture. This also is part of the law of Uganda. It was domesticated into the laws of Uganda. The same provisions, very similar to those of the Rome Statute, provide that anybody who violates the law is responsible for the violation of that law. You cannot say, because my commander or my superior told me to execute that order, Therefore, I'm not liable for it. So orders from above is a euphemism for violation of rule of law. These people think that they can get away with it by saying and pleading, I was ordered from the above, that's why I violated the law. By the way, under the Convention Against Torture, which is part of the law of Uganda, everybody is responsible above the one who executes the order. In other words, all the way, it goes all the way to the president. If any police officer or army officer or whoever tortures a Ugandan, that torture, all the people who are above, the commanders, including the president, are liable for it. So the orders from above is an empty plea to excuse one's illegal conduct, and it is prohibited under the Convention Against Torture and the Rome Statute. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amobe Musoke. Our next question is directed to the Vice Chairman, and here it goes. COVID-19 has devastated the economy, and this has compounded an already unacceptably high unemployment, biting poverty and suffering to Ugandans. How would a post-Museveni administration go about the important issue of economic recovery, job creation, and investment in development? It's directed to the Vice Chairman, Mr. Mwanga Batuka. If you could unmute yourself, please.
Thank you very much. Fortunately, UDF has thought about how this economy could be again moved to what I described as the low-income trap, which has just gotten worse because of COVID-19. If we thought we had problems before COVID, now they have just been compounded. But the foundational challenges are still the same. As I outlined earlier, I can repeat just 4 pillars on which we should revitalize this economy. The first part is going to be where our citizens reside. 80% of them are in rural areas. Many of them are on the land. They are engaged in agriculture. So in a plan that any responsible government may contemplate, cannot miss this big opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, the current regime has never funded agriculture to the sufficient level, which has been approved by different entities and organizations in which we have membership. But going back to this particular issue, enhancing agriculture is number one. Increasing production and productivity, making sure that our citizens, and especially those that are engaged in agriculture beyond subsistence, are not just subjected to the vagaries of nature, the pests, drought, and things like that, making sure that you are getting extension services, getting good seeds, and having those agricultural officers actually doing work. So that is number one. The next part of the puzzle is making sure that, again, in order to anchor this next point, I have to remind the listeners that the government cannot create enough jobs to absorb the number of people that are coming into the workforce. Having made that point, it can make sure that it doesn't make the situation worse, but it can be proactive in leading the country by making smart investments and also promoting private sector development, making sure that we create a business environment that does not encumber those that want to create jobs. I mentioned earlier about the uncertainty of taxes. I don't know if you had, but pre-COVID, is a 20-footer that is being brought into the country. Business owners were being asked to pay 48 million shillings. As the government is running out of money, to hear that now they are asking 500 million shillings, from 48 to 500. This is just an example of the kind of regime that we have. So, there are a number of areas which we can tackle this whole thing. We cannot create enough jobs for everyone, but we can definitely create a better environment for them. Create certainty in terms of what taxes they expect to pay. Make sure that the regulations are published. Everyone knows what can be done or what they can't do, and making sure that there is you fight corruption, which Mr. Mbirumusoke talked about, and you make sure that you have human resource development. Two prongs in that. One is education that Dr. Mkebezi spoke about, and the health component that Dr. Nakatude spoke about. You cannot have a productive workforce that is not educated or that is not healthy. Infrastructure is also another part because it's an intermediate input. If people are producing, whether it's matoke or coffee, whatever it is, and they are in remote areas where roads are unpassable or they are just seasonal, then you cannot have the commerce that is required to move products and people from one point to the other to boost economic activity. So again, the kind of things that I'm looking at right now are those 4 pillars. Once we tackle those, then you will spur economic activity. That's it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mwangabatuka.
Ms. Twekisiza, I think we are running out of time, but maybe we can have one more question, and then we end the conference. Ask one more question, please.
Thank you so much. And this question is directed to the chairman. UDF has been in the struggle for over 10 years. What have you achieved during that time? And if you take power, what will UDF bring to the table? Chairman, please, if you could please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much again. Yes, we have been in the struggle as UDF for the past 10 years, and we've been hard at work exploring ways and preparing Uganda for the post-Museveni era. We have policies in place covering all aspects of the economy of the country, and you've just had a taste of what we have prepared in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of economy, in terms of constitutional affairs, and much more is available that we cannot discuss now. We have a vision to transform Uganda from a corrupt dictatorship to a peaceful and prosperous country in 10 years. That's what we call this phoenix-like rise from the ashes after Mr. Museveni. We talk and walk liberation. We are prepared for a post-conflict needs assessment to identify the priorities, validate them, and then initiate a monitoring process. We would establish a robust small business ecosystem to engender the creation of good jobs and improve people's lives. I have no doubt in my mind, with all my heart, I believe that UDF is the best option for Uganda and arguably the only viable alternative. The shortest route to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and all the problems that we have right now is to take action through an uprising and get rid of this rotten and corrupt regime. There's no way around it. We have to do it now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would like to, there is one Facebook question here. We've been on the chat, but let's go to the Facebook. Just one question, and I think it's going to go to the chairman. This Facebook question is from a missionary who lived in Uganda. How is the UDF different from the present regime?
Thank you very much. UDF as an organization that has been in the struggle for 10 years has values and principles. We have instituted structures within our organization as precursors for building institutions. And so we have respect for institutions. And there is no democracy that can survive without strong institutions. And what has been happening in Uganda over the past 34 years or so is the total destruction of institutions. Everything is about Mr. Museveni and his Mali's project. And so in terms of differences between UDF and the current regime is that we believe in democracy. We believe in the establishment of a federal democrat dispensation, accountable, inclusive, transparent. And we believe in a constitutional moment that will establish an environment that's conducive to development, sustainable growth. It all comes down to democracy. It all comes down to values and principles. But I believe that will be another day when we will fully explore the values and principles we espouse and which are so critically needed in order to move Uganda from the dire situation it finds itself into. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think I would like to get to the end of the conference. I would like to thank very much the co-host for assisting with the organization and with the execution of this conference. I am very grateful to all the presenters for the wonderful job you have done. I know you have a lot of material. I have listened to you during the other live conferences, summarizing your work and presenting it in 10 minutes and capturing all the highlights, all the necessary points is recommendable. Thank you very much to all the attendants, wherever you are, for spending time with us. This is critical, this is urgent. I also want to thank those who are following us on Facebook. Thank you very much. Please forward the the message, spread the word. This meeting has been recorded, this mini conference, so the recording is going to be available, and I will ask you to distribute that too. I don't know that the chairman has just spoken, but if he has got any final words or message, that would be acceptable. We still have like 4 minutes. I'm sorry I went over by 15 minutes, but that's okay. I think I've seen a few people leaving, but that's fine. So if you can give us one takeaway, or if you want to close this meeting, that would be very much appreciated, Mr. Chairman. If not, I am going to end the meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The COVID-19 economic devastation is affecting Ugandans very adversely, and the effects are dire and likely to worsen now that we've moved into the community transmission phase. All the structural problems that have persisted as a result of economic stagnation and retrogression are being amplified, including joblessness, healthcare, energy, education, and agriculture. The regime is trying to borrow its way out of the crisis, worsening the already crippling debt. It has put its hope in debt forgiveness. The shortest route to mitigation of all these problems is to deny this regime oxygen now. There is no way around it. Those who scream elections or reforms can either save this regime in some form at best, or engage in another futile undertaking at worst, as has been the case over the past 34 years. The time is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, we end our conference today. So we stop our